Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're wandering the glowing heart of old Venice, the island of Murano, where furnaces flicker behind shuttered windows and molten glass breathes in the dark. You're not a master or a merchant, just an ordinary artisan drifting through a world shaped by fire, breath, and quiet craft. Before we start, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you'd prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair, plus other sleep tools, in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. You rise while the sky is still a deep, untroubled blue. The room around you holds onto the last breaths of night. The faint chill clinging to the walls, the soft rustle of a linen sheet, the steady drip of water from a nearby cistern. You sit for a moment, letting your eyes adjust, listening to your own slow inhale and exhale. The world feels quiet enough that even the dust in the air seems unwilling to disturb the silence. When you step outside, the stones beneath your feet are cool, almost damp, as though the lagoon has reached up during the night to touch them with its fingers. A breeze carries a whisper of salt, mingled with the faint sweetness of baking bread drifting from some unseen oven. You walk with a steady, unhurried gait, your body still remembering the softness of your bed, but moving toward a place that warms you in a different way. The wooden bridge ahead rests in the pale, early shadows. It creaks a little under your weight, as it always does, like an old friend announcing your arrival. Beneath it, the lagoon barely moves. The water holds the night's darkness in its surface, absorbing the early hints of dawn without offering much reflection back. You follow the narrow path across, the boards familiar under your feet, the faint scent of aging timber rising with every step. Murano lies before you in a stillness that is almost ceremonial. The chimneys of the glass houses are dark silhouettes against the faintest silver rising at the horizon. The island always wakes slowly, as if savouring its last few minutes before surrendering to heat and work and the sound of tools meeting metal. You walk through this half-lit world feeling suspended between night and day, past and present, rest and routine. Somewhere deeper within the maze of workshop walls, a low hum begins to roll through the air, the kind of hum that only a furnace can make. It is not loud, just purposeful, like a creature stretching its limbs after a long sleep. You feel it before you hear it fully, the warmth threading through the cool breeze, guiding you like a lighthouse flame that has forgotten obsession and settled into something gentler. As you move closer to the glasshouse, the scent shifts. Salt gives way to cinders, smoke mingles with moisture, and the faint aroma of burned wood settles into your clothes as easily as morning dew. You pull the door open with a practiced motion, careful not to startle the quiet. Inside, the air wraps around you in a soft wave of heat, not sharp or sudden, but the welcoming warmth of a place that remembers you. The workshop is still dim, lit only by the soft orange glow that beats behind the furnace vents. The benches sit waiting, tools lined in neat rows, as if resting from their own long night. Each rod, paddle and shear feels patient, almost contemplative, like they know that nothing good is ever shaped in a hurry. Their metal surfaces catch bits of flickering firelight, turning them into tiny sleeping stars. A few figures move in the shadows. The masters don't speak much at this hour. They rarely need to. Their nods are enough, acknowledging your presence with the easy understanding that comes from working side by side for years. Someone tosses another piece of wood into a firebox, and the glow brightens for a moment, warming the edges of the room. The furnace lets out a sigh, as if thanking them. You take your place among the familiar sights and sounds, the benches smoothed by countless hands, the faint scratches on the stone floor marking decades of footsteps. The lingering heat that clings to every surface, your fingers brush the blowpipe. It feels cool, though you can sense the memory of yesterday's work, still lingering faintly in the metal. You turn it slowly, appreciating the quiet weight of it, the way it balances toward the center like a well-behaved tool that has finally learned to trust your grip. Outside, dawn begins to press its soft light through the windows. The sky turns a gentle grey-blue, and the first birds call out from rafters and eaves. Their voices echo faintly, mixing with the steady murmur of the furnace until the whole room feels like it is breathing along with you. You stretch your arms, letting the warmth seep into your joints, loosening them for the hours of delicate work ahead. When the furnace doors open, the room brightens instantly. Inside, the molten glass glows like a captured sunrise, thick, luminous, and restless. It displays a shimmering orange that seems to pulse with its own quiet heartbeat. You feel its heat press lightly against your cheeks, warming your eyelashes, reminding you of the odd comfort that fire offers when you've spent years learning not to fear it. You gather a bit of the molten mass with a gentle twist of the blowpipe. It clings to the metal like honey slow to leave a spoon. The substance hums with possibility. Every shape it might become waits inside it, patient and shimmering. As you lift it from the furnace, you turn the pipe with steady hands, letting the glass cool just enough to hold its form. The glow reflects off the floor, off your skin, off the edge of every tool nearby, making the whole workshop feel like it exists inside a quiet flame. Before you breathe into it, you pause, not out of drama, but out of respect. Even after years of practice, the first breath of the day feels special. It is a handshake between you and the molten world, a tiny agreement that neither of you will rush each other. You bring your lips to the pipe and exhale gently. The slight expansion inside responds, a soft wobble at first, like a creature blinking awake. You turn the pipe, coaxing it into roundness, letting the rhythm of your breath align with the rhythm of the furnace. The heat builds around you in waves, steady and unhurried. It wraps your shoulders, brushes your hairline, and pushes sleepiness out of your bones more effectively than any alarm ever could. The masters move around you with slow intention. None of them hurry, even if the day will eventually demand speed. At this hour, work feels like a quiet dance, each step measured, each motion carrying the weight of centuries of artisans who once did the same. The glass continues to grow under your hand, glowing softer, shifting from bright orange to a warm peach as it cools. You admire it, not out of pride, but out of a calm amusement. It is always slightly imperfect at this stage, wobbling in ways that remind you the material has a mind of its own. Yet those imperfections make the process feel more human, more honest. A smooth, perfect start would feel suspicious, like a day eager to misbehave later. You reheat the piece, letting it drift back into that molten dream state. Each time you place it into the furnace, the process feels more like reassurance than correction. You tell the glass, in your own quiet way, that it has all the time it needs. Outside, more voices drift across the canals. The island is beginning to wake. Doors open, shutters creak. Water slaps gently against boat hulls. The sky brightens enough that shadows recede from the corners of the workshop. A few rays of light reflect off stray shards on the floor, turning them into tiny jewels scattered across the stone. You lift your piece again and feel the glow press into your palms. The day stretches ahead. Soft and open, the furnace hums at your back. The island wakes just beyond the walls, and you stand within this calm, glowing world, shaping the first fragile moment of a long, warm day. The warmth meets you long before the doorway does, drifting outward in soft, pulsing waves that brush your cheeks and settle around your shoulders. You step inside the furnace hall slowly, letting your eyes adjust to the glow that lives here, even before sunrise. A glow that seems to rise from the very stones themselves. Shadows cling to corners and rafters, long and silky. In the wavering light, swaying as if listening to the hum of fire, the masters are already moving about with an unhurried grace, their silhouettes bending, lifting, and pausing in rhythms that feel older than memory. They acknowledge you with gentle nods, not the crisp gestures of command, but the quiet assurance of people who know exactly what the morning requires. Their pace never changes. It's steady enough to soothe the nerves of anyone, foolish enough to think glass-blowing is frantic work. If anything, their calm presence suggests that everything important in this room happens when you're patient enough to wait for it. You walk across the room, your feet brushing against warm stone that has absorbed years of furnace heat and countless footsteps. The air carries a faint mixture of charcoal and heated minerals, a scent that settles deep into the fibres of your clothes. It's a fragrance you hardly notice anymore, yet it will follow you for the rest of your life, clinging to you even on days when the furnaces are quiet. The main furnace sits at the heart of the room, its open mouth shimmering with molten brightness. The interior glows in shifting layers of orange and white, like the heart of a small sun that the glassblowers tend with gentle daily encouragement. Even from a distance, the radiance touches your skin, and you feel an unspoken invitation in its warmth. On your bench, the tools wait exactly where you left them. The blowpipes lean in their rack with a slight tilt, thin flecks of soot catching the morning firelight. Shears rest half open, as if mid-thought. The paddles carry faint scorch marks, reminders of the heat they've endured and will soon endure again. You run your fingers lightly along the cool metal of a pipe. It feels heavy, but balanced. The kind of weight that becomes comfortable only after time, repetition, and countless attempts at mastering something that never stops testing your steadiness. One of the masters shuffles past, carrying a ladle of raw silica. The powder glitters faintly in the dim light, like frost trapped inside a wooden bowl. He pours it into a crucible, with a motion so smooth it barely stirs the air, then gives you a faint, amused look, as if he's long since realised that glass begins as something unglamorous, and that the miracle lies not in the ingredients, but in the way the furnace persuades them to change. The hall doesn't grow louder as people settle in. Instead, it grows denser, warmer, more alive. Every person moves with the confidence of routine, the comfort of knowing their hands have repeated the same gestures enough times to understand the weight of each movement. You take your place among them, feeling the subtle shift that happens when your body and mind begin preparing for hours of heat, breath, and steady concentration. The fire in the main furnace crackles in a measured way, never too loud, never erratic. You can sense the delicate balance the keepers maintain, feeding the flame just enough wood, opening the vents a precise amount, adjusting the airflow with movements so small you might miss them if you weren't looking closely. They treat the furnace like a living companion, not a beast to be tamed, but an old friend who responds kindly when handled with respect. You gather molten glass with a practiced motion, the material wrapping around the end of the blowpipe like honey drawn from a pot too close to melting. It glows with a richness that is somehow both wild and obedient. You turn it slowly, letting the centrifugal pull create the beginnings of shape. The glass drips slightly, then firms into steadiness as the heat retreats, just enough for you to guide it. The warmth of the furnace hall settles deeper into your muscles, loosening the tension in your shoulders and hands. The air is thick but not oppressive. It resembles the heavy blankets people wrap around themselves during cold nights, comforting in its weight. Every breath you take draws in heat, smoke, and that faint mineral sweetness that seems to cling to molten glass. Even your eyelashes feel warmer here. You bring the pipe to your lips and breathe, slow, steady, unforced. The glass swells obediently, growing into a small globe that wavers at the edges. The wobble brings a small pull of amusement to your mouth. It always starts like this, a little uneven, a little too eager in one direction, not quite symmetrical. But the wobble is part of the charm, part of the story that each piece carries in its earliest moments, before skill and correction smooth out the enthusiasm. Across the hall, another artisan rotates a long pipe with the rhythm of someone spinning yarn. The molten glass at the end shines like a captured ember, reflecting in the curves of his cheek. A soft clink of tools echoes somewhere behind him, a paddle being set down, a shear opening and closing with a gentle metallic sigh. The sounds blend together into a quiet orchestra of intention. The deeper you settle into your place in the hall, the more the world outside feels like a dream. The heat becomes its own kind of silence, softening the edges of everything. Even the crackle of wood in the furnace seems rhythmic, lulling. Time loosens its grip, dripping forward like cooling glass, slow, deliberate, unbothered by urgency. You turn the pipe again, guiding the molten sphere into a smoother shape. The glow pulses under your control, brightening a little when you bring it too close to the heat, dimming slightly when you roll it along the marvering table. Thin ribbons of smoke curl upward as the hot glass touches the surface, leaving a faint scent of burned wood. A master pauses at your side for a moment, watching with a quiet, observational patience. He doesn't correct you. He rarely does. Instead, he lets the moment stretch on until you notice the slight tilt of his head, the wordless reminder that the furnace offers its best results to those who don't rush their breath. You slow your movements instinctively, allowing the glass to settle into a more obedient form. When he moves on, his footsteps blend seamlessly into the hum of the hall. The room brightens as the sun rises outside, though the furnace glow still dominates the air. You can sense the warmth deepening, spreading, thickening. It slips beneath your collar, wraps around your wrists, fills the space behind your lungs. Even your thoughts seem to slow under its influence, drifting like ash caught in a soft updraft. Another gather, another swirl of molten brightness. The metal pipe warms under your palms, yet never to the point of discomfort. You rotate it with a steady rhythm that feels almost meditative, each turn a quiet reminder that mastery is less about perfection and more about listening, to heat, to breath, to the subtle resistance of material that wants to shape itself but relies on you to guide it gently. Someone laughs softly from across the hall, the kind of easy laughter that slips out when a piece sags unexpectedly or a decorative curl droops before it finds its resolve. The humour here is light, harmless, rooted in the understanding that mistakes are simply another texture in the day. You smile faintly at the sound, letting it weave itself into the warmth surrounding you. The furnace murmurs again, a low exhale of heat that brushes the back of your neck. You steady your pipe, shaping the fragile form at its end, with slow movements that feel as natural as breathing. The hall holds you, cradling you in firelight and shadow, guiding you gently deeper into the craft that fills your days with glow and warmth and quiet amusement. Here, inside these walls, surrounded by molten colour and murmured breath, you begin to feel the day taking shape, softly, warmly, without ever needing to rush. You turn once more toward the furnace, feeling the furnace hall's warmth settle like a shawl across your shoulders. The air hums with the same patient energy. It has a way of encouraging you to move slowly, as if haste would only make the glass more willful. You reach for the blowpipe, its cool metal a small shock against the heat that lives everywhere else, and you let your hands remember the subtle choreography, the angle of the wrist, the tension in the fingers, the gentle pressure you will need to give with your breath. Leaning toward the furnace, you scoop the pipe in with a practiced motion, dipping the tip into the mouth of that bright, alive ember. For a moment, the molten glass clings to the interior of the heat, a luminous pool that seems to hesitate between giving up its glow and holding it like a secret. When it finally takes to the pipe, the mass wraps itself around the metal in a rounded bead, catching and magnifying the furnace light until it feels as though you are holding a tiny sun on the end of your rod. The weight of that first gather is deceptive. It feels heavier somehow than its size suggests, pulling at your forearm with a gentle insistence. You support it with both hands and lift it away, rolling it once across the marvering table. The marver is cool beneath the glass, a flat plane of steel that helps the molten material settle its shape. The contact produces a small hiss and a soft momentary smoke. Nothing alarming, merely the breath of heat meeting coolness, a quiet negotiation between two different temperatures. As you work, you think about the strange alchemy that made this moment possible. The sand, coarse, pale grains mined from faraway shores, has become glass through patient, relentless heat and human attention. Additives coax colour and skilled hands coax clarity and form. You do not need to catalogue the chemistry to feel its wonder. The transformation is visible in the glow at the end of your pipe, in the way the material shifts from slump to promise as you turn and breathe. You bring the pipe to your mouth and breathe. The air you push is neither a shout nor a whisper, merely a steady exhale that inflates the glass like a small, obedient balloon. It blossoms gently under your breath, expanding into a roundness that seems surprised to be allowed space. The first wobble appears at the edge of the sphere, a soft asymmetry that makes you smile. There is dignity in imperfection, and the glass announces its personality without embarrassment. Turning the pipe becomes a kind of slow song. Each rotation is careful, the rhythm steady as a heartbeat. You rely on this rhythm. A breath, a turn, a glance at the glowing heart, another small exhale. The piece lengthens or bulks as you coax it, and when the glass resists, you do not push it aggressively. Instead, you reheat it, offering the material more warmth so it will willingly reshape itself. There is an etiquette here. One must ask, not force. Around you, the hall moves in complementary motions. A colleague fans a furnace ember, sending a spark of light that looks like a travelling star. Another dips a cane, an arc of coloured glass, into a bath of molten clarity to paint a subtle stripe along a vessel's side. Their work does not compete with yours. Instead, it layers into the same slow communal rhythm. You share tools, benches, glances. The exchange is quiet and familiar. The language of gestures in a room like this can be more eloquent than speech. You begin to introduce colour into your gather, not with hurry, but with deliberation. A thin trail of cobalt, laid against the cooling skin, catches and dissolves into the body when you reheat it, tinting the glass with the kind of depth that looks like water seen through old window panes. Colours here behave like guests. If welcomed properly, they stay gracefully. If forced, they sulk and separate. You like the way pigments mingle when treated kindly, a slow conversation that yields subtle, layered hues rather than abrupt statements. At one point, the glass threatens to droop, too hot and too soft in the centre. In the same unhurried way you always practice, you bring it to the marver and roll it gently, coaxing the errant curve into balance. Sometimes the tool slips or your hand is too slow and the piece takes on a jaunty tilt. There is a small amusement in these moments. The object asserts itself, testing your patience and skill. You laugh softly with someone nearby. The sound is low and knowing, part of the warm lore of the hall. These tiny rebellions are more instructive than any flawless success. When the shape feels ready for more precise work, you add the puntile or punty to finish the form, affixing the pontil rod to the base with a bit of molten glass, and then releasing the blowpipe when the connection is secure. This exchange always feels a little like passing a baton in a long relay. The punty allows you to work on the opening and lip without worrying you will weaken the base. You place your lips to the opening again, inflate with delicate measured breaths, and the vessel obliges by opening like a flower that has been told it is safe to bloom. There is a rhythmic patience to just sitting with a piece while it cools. The annealing oven will take care of structural tensions later, but in these early moments, you must respect the glass's pace. You watch it glow and dim, the colour shifting as the heat finds equilibrium. The transparency is a living surface now. It catches reflections of faces, the glow of tools, a smudge of soot near a master's brow. Each reflection becomes a small portrait of this place and time. You sometimes wonder, not with bitterness, but with a soft historian's curiosity, about the hands that once turned such pipes long before you. The tradition is older than many of the buildings you pass on your way here. Those earlier hands carried the same patient breath, the same measured rotations, and small improvised jokes. You sense their presence in the worn edges of the marver and the faint polish on certain tools. The hall seems to have accumulated not just heat, but stories, small domestic chronicles embedded in the grain of the place. A visitor might assume that the artistry lies only in the obvious, ornate pieces, the chandeliers with their arabesque arms, the goblets that catch candlelight like captured stars. But the secret, is in these quiet births of form, the humble vessel that began as a single breath, the subtle taper of a rim, the gentle curve of a base, the way colour breathes through the glass. These speak of years of tiny adjustments, all stitched together into a practice that is patient about its own perfection. At midday, the light in the furnace hall shifts, painting softer shadows that fall across your hands. You pause, not because work demands it, but because your body recognizes the small necessary rhythm of attention and rest. You cradle the piece, feeling its warmth through the punty, appreciating the way even the heat has memory. It remembers how many times it was touched by human hands, today, yesterday, and in years you cannot name. You set the vessel aside for a moment on the bench, protected by a soft bed of sand, and watch the glow sink gradually. The annealer will later determine whether this child of flame keeps its shape, but for now the form looks modest and honest, a small promise of utility and beauty. It might become a cup someone raises quietly at a supper, or a small bottle to carry perfume from a distant court. The possibilities are simple and comforting. In the hum of the hall, with the furnace voicing a ceaseless low conversation and the tools humming their metallic replies, you find pleasure in the unglamorous miracle of the first breath. Each inhale into the pipe is an act of trust, a small pact between you and a material that listens. You work not to dominate the glass, but to help it remember its better angles, its truest brightness. As the light outside deepens and the day moves forward, you gather yourself for the next gentle challenge. The first breath into glass is never final. It unfolds into a series of patient decisions, each one shaping the life of what you hold. You take a slow, quiet satisfaction from this, understanding that the story of your craft is written as much in calm persistence as in brilliant contrivances, and that the glowing bead at the end of your pipe prefers to be loved, not hurried. The glow at the end of your blowpipe softens as the heat recedes, revealing the faintest hint of colour beginning to stir inside the glass. Barely noticeable at first, like a shy thought forming behind a whisper. It is not enough to shape anything meaningful yet. It needs depth, a voice, something more than the quiet translucence that raw molten glass offers. The furnaces provide the heat. Your breath shapes the form, but the colour has its own life, independent and unpredictable. You set the pipe aside for a moment, resting it gently on the metal supports, and move toward the low workbench where jars of mineral pigments sit in modest rows. Their surfaces are coated in dust, the same shade as the powders inside, giving them the look of old scholars too engrossed in their own knowledge to bother with appearances. Each jar holds the promise of transformation. Cobalt, the deep blue of forgotten oceans, copper oxide blushing green like tarnished statues, iron filings yielding warm ambers that glow like late sunlight trapped in molten honey. You reach for the cobalt first, The jar is heavy in your hand, the pigment inside shifting with a soft, granular sigh. When you lift the lid, a small cloud rises, blue so fine and light, it seems to hover before deciding whether to settle. You tap a small amount onto a stone slab, letting the grains scatter into a tiny constellation of possibility. The mortar and pestle wait beside it, worn smooth by years of grinding minerals into finer and finer dust, coaxing them into the state where they might dissolve seamlessly into molten glass. You begin to grind. The rhythmic motion of stone against stone is soothing rather than tiring, carrying a steady, repetitive sound that blends easily with the low murmur of the furnace behind you. Each circular movement presses the pigment into a softer texture, smoothing rough grains until they feel almost like powder caught on a fingertip. As you work, the fine dust releases a faint mineral scent, dry, earthy, and oddly comforting. It reminds you that even the brightest of colours begins as something humble, drawn from the quiet depths of the earth. When the cobalt has reached a consistency that feels right, you shift your attention to a small bowl holding a mixture of silica and soda ash, waiting to become part of the next gather. You sprinkle the blue powder over it, watching the colour darken as it blends with the raw material. There is something faintly humorous in the way these drab granules will soon melt into a hue, so vivid it can startle even seasoned artisans. For now, though, it sits unremarkably in a bowl, as if unaware of the brilliance it carries within. Nearby, another artisan works copper oxide into a green mixture, and the two of you exchange a small smile, an acknowledgement of the strange intimacy you share with these materials. You each know how unreliable colour can be. A touch too much heat, and a vibrant pigment dulls into brown ash. Too little, and the colour refuses to bloom at all. Some mornings the furnace seems in a generous mood, revealing rich tones with minimal coaxing. Other days it guards its secrets more stubbornly, producing hues that seem to come from a different intention entirely. You return to the furnace with your mixture, feeling the shift in the hall's air as you approach. The heat intensifies around you in layers, warming the bowl, warming your hands, warming even the space behind your thoughts. When you open the furnace door, the interior flares with molten brightness, and the colours within the crucibles pulse like embers caught mid-breath. You add your mixture to the edge of one crucible, watching the raw grains slide into the molten mass with a soft hiss. They disappear almost instantly, swallowed by the glowing surface. For a few moments, nothing changes. The molten glass remains the same bright, blank orange that hides everything within it. Colour takes time. The pigments must dissolve fully, yielding their hues only when the heat and the chemistry come to a quiet agreement. You close the furnace door and step back, letting the transformation happen in the privacy of the heat. While you wait, you tend to the other pigments on the workbench. You stir iron oxide into a shallow ceramic dish, watching it swirl into warm ochre shades that resemble fragments of distant sunsets. You roll a tiny amount of manganese dioxide between your fingertips, feeling its graininess before wiping it off and leaving faint purple smudges behind. These smudges amuse you, small, uninvited badges of the craft, marking your hands in colours that will wash off eventually, but not before spreading themselves to tools, sleeves, and occasionally the edges of your nose. Returning to the furnace, you feel the heat push against you with familiar insistence. When you open the door again, the molten pool has changed. Beneath the surface glow, the first hints of blue begin to stir, dark, smoky, and swirling like ink slowly waking in water. It is not the full colour yet, only an echo, but even this early stage feels like a quiet miracle. You watch the transformation with an affection that surprises you every time. No matter how many gathers you have crafted, the sight of colour blooming from minerals still feels like witnessing something newly born. You gather a small amount of the now blue glass, turning the pipe carefully to keep the molten sphere from slipping. As it cools slightly, the deep hue emerges more clearly, a dark cobalt core surrounded by lighter edges where the heat still clings. You rotate it again, letting the light catch the shifting tones. The glass seems to breathe its colour into existence, deepening with every moment it resists the cooling air. The workbench welcomes the glowing sphere as you roll it gently across the marva. The blue gains texture in the light, showing slight variations, some intentional, others offered by chance. The furnace is a collaborator whose decisions are unpredictable. A degree too hot or too cold, a moment too long or too brief, and the colour may slip into a shade you did not expect. Yet these irregularities add charm, a quiet signature that speaks more of authenticity than perfection ever could. You add streaks of white glass across the cobalt surface, thin lines that melt into soft waves when reheated. These streaks blur into patterns reminiscent of sea foam on dark water, merging and diverging in ways that feel like natural tides captured in molten form. As you reheat the glass, the pattern swells slowly, guided by motion and temperature rather than strict design. You coax them gently, knowing that too much intention can ruin a moment that wants to unfold on its own. A fellow worker at the next bench holds up a vibrant green piece, its colour verdant and lively like leaves backlit by early morning sun. He raises an eyebrow in mock pride, and you answer with a subtle nod of acknowledgement, the silent praise shared between people who understand how fragile success can be when working with materials that behave according to their own temperaments. You return to your blue gather, shaping it with a wooden block soaked carefully in water. The block sizzles softly as it contacts the molten surface, releasing a faint cloud of steam that carries a scent of charred wood, warm, earthy, strangely pleasing. The glass responds to this encouragement by smoothing into a more cohesive form, the colours blending in wayward but charming waves. You guide it gently, coaxing the sides to round out evenly, but leaving enough variation that the piece retains the sincerity of its birth. As the colour deepens into a richer cobalt, you sense its personality settle, a quiet, steady hue that feels both ancient and freshly forged. You reheat, shape and turn, watching the transformations unfold as naturally as breath. The pigments you ground earlier have dissolved completely now, leaving only their brilliance behind. You take a quiet satisfaction in knowing that a mineral once buried in stone now glows in translucent beauty through the collaboration of fire and hand. When the moment comes to cool the piece, you set it on the annealing rack, letting it rest in the controlled warmth. The colour holds its dignity as it cools, settling into its true shade with slow inevitability. You can almost imagine it recalling the furnace's heat, preserving that memory forever in its glow. You step back from the bench and let your shoulders loosen. Around you, the hall continues its quiet alchemy, greens blooming from copper, reds coaxed from gold, ambers encouraged by iron. Colours rise from minerals and chance, each one a patient miracle shaped by breath, heat, and the delicate negotiations between craft and chemistry. And as you watch the pigments dissolve and glow, you feel a familiar warmth, an understanding that no matter how long you work here, these transformations will always feel a little magical, a little humorous, and deeply, wonderfully human. The colours you coaxed into the glass still shimmer faintly in the corners of your vision as you ease back toward the furnace, the warmth meeting you like a familiar greeting. The hall holds its steady pulse, the kind that makes time feel thick and slow, stretching itself across the day in long, unhurried strokes. The workbench, the marvering table, the glowing crucibles, they all seem to settle into place around you, forming a quiet circle where repetition becomes its own slow ritual. Your hands find the blowpipe without searching for it. The metal is warming now, no longer the cool shock it once was this morning. It rests with the ease of something shaped by habit, an extension of your arm rather than a tool requiring thought. You lift it toward the furnace again, watching the glow inside dance against the motion. Another gather, not too much, not too little, just enough to begin the next piece with modest intention. The molten glass clings to the pipe in its usual way, heavy and obedient. As you draw it out, you rotate the pipe steadily, and the mesmerizing rhythm begins again. Gather, turn, shape, reheat. Movements you've made so many times they no longer feel like separate steps, but a single, unbroken gesture that loops throughout the day. Each repetition hums softly in your muscles, a familiar melody that never grows dull. Instead, it becomes grounding, a quiet reassurance that the craft will reward you as long as you meet it with patience. You bring the glass to the marver, rolling it with a slow pressure that flattens imperfections and prepares the surface. The table responds with its gentle hiss, a small exhale of steam, as if acknowledging your presence. The sound drifts upward and dissolves into the furnace's hum. You turn the pipe, letting the glow settle, watching the molten material calm under your guidance. There is something soothing in this process, the way your motions coax order out of heat and fluidity, the way the glass seems to relax into its own shape when handled just right. Your breath becomes part of the rhythm as you inflate the gather. Not a single forceful push, but several soft measured inhales and exhales, each one coaxing the form into something more distinct. A roundness begins to appear, then a graceful stretch, then a subtle tilt that you correct with a simple twist of your wrist. No rush, the rhythm itself teaches you that everything in this hall rewards slowness. Every mistake that comes from haste shatters with a delicate sting, and every success born from patience carries the quiet satisfaction of something earned gently. When the glass cools too quickly, you walk it back to the furnace. The reheating chamber opens like a warm breath, embracing the piece without judgment. You let the molten glow return, turning the pipe evenly to keep the heat balanced. Reheat, turn, reheat, another rhythm within the rhythm, circular and unbroken. Sometimes the glass slumps unexpectedly when it grows too soft, and you smile at its mischief. Sometimes it stiffens more stubbornly than it should, making you work a little harder to shape it again. These small rebellions are part of the day's slow conversation. You do not scold the material, you merely adjust. You lean into the repetition with a kind of comfortable surrender. The hall around you joins in the same cadence. Tools scrape gently, pipes rotate in steady hands, wooden blocks hiss against molten glass. The soft chatter of artisans rises and falls, but always at the same muted level, as if the air itself knows not to disturb the delicate balance between focus and tranquility. A young apprentice at the corner bench fumbles slightly with a gather, the molten mass tipping awkwardly to one side. He catches it just in time, leaving a lopsided sphere wobbling at the end of his pipe. His expression folds into embarrassment, but the master beside him only nods, guiding his wrist with a steady, unhurried motion. The apprentice breathes, the glass steadies, and the rhythm catches hold of him again, pulling him back into the flow. You watch this small interaction with fondness. The craft teaches, most clearly, through moments like these, gentle reminders rather than loud corrections. Returning to your own work, you feel the familiar warmth rising along your arms. The glass in your hands responds with increasing cooperation, as if acknowledging your persistence. You shape the piece with a wooden paddle, pressing lightly, guiding it into symmetry. The paddle's surface smokes gently, adding its scent of char and resin to the hall, one of those smells that becomes inseparable from the life of a glassblower. Repetition has softened your thoughts, smoothing their edges until only the essential remains. The world narrows to the glow of the furnace and the weight of the tool in your hands. You find comfort in that narrowing. The wider world can be unruly, crowded markets, hurried merchants, unpredictable tides of the lagoon. But here, each repetition acts like a boundary, holding space for calm. You shift to the shears, trimming a delicate lip into the glowing form. The metal touches the surface with a crisp sound. Part snip, part whisper. A thin thread of molten glass stretches, then breaks away with predictable grace. You flick the strand into the waste bucket, where it cools into curled, glittering fragments. They sparkle like tiny frozen waves whenever the furnace flame catches them, each one a record of a moment that lasted only a heartbeat. As the day progresses, the rhythm deepens. Your body knows the motion so well that your hands seem to move even before your thoughts arrive. The repetition becomes a kind of quiet meditation, one that doesn't ask for stillness but for motion, steady enough to lull the mind. There is humour in it too. The little quirks, the small miscalculations that turn into unintentional designs. The brief moments when the glass insists on being more dramatic than necessary. You accept these with a warm sort of amusement. The work has personality. It refuses perfection without negotiation. At times, the furnace flares slightly, sending a brighter bloom of light across the hall. Someone calls softly for more fuel. Wood is added. The flame settles again. The rhythm never breaks. It only adjusts itself, accommodating the new warmth, the new speed at which the glass responds. You adjust along with it, letting your breath, hands and attention shift without thought. A vessel takes shape in your hands, a tall, narrow form with a graceful curve and a faint trace of the cobalt you worked earlier. You stretch the glass by pulling gently, letting gravity do part of the labour. The glass responds beautifully, elongating with an elegance that feels indulgent. It twirls under your rotation like liquid ribbon. When its proportions feel right, you place it into the pontal cradle, tap the blowpipe lightly, and free the piece. The sound of separation, sharp, clean, joins the soft symphony around you. The finishing work requires its own set of small, repeated motions. You widen the rim, flame polish the lip, coax the shape into its final attitude. Each action is precise but never hurried. Even the smallest imperfection becomes a quiet charm, a reminder that the human hand guided this transformation. And when the vessel finally rests in the annealing oven, settling among its glowing companions, it carries the entire rhythm of the day within its structure. You pause for a breath, brushing flecks of soot from your forearm. The hall hums on, wrapped in warmth and quiet resolve. You pick up your pipe again, ready for the next gather, not because you rush, but because the rhythm carries you gently forward, guiding your hands and thoughts with the simple, steady comfort of repetition. And as you prepare the next breath, the next soak, the next shape, the next small negotiation with fire and form, you feel the steady pulse of the craft anchoring you once more. An endless cycle of motions that never grows old, always offering the calm certainty of something learned not in haste, but in the slow patience of 1,000 steady repetitions. By the time the morning heat thickens in the furnace hall, the first footsteps begin to weave their way toward you, soft leather soles tapping across the stone floor with a blend of confidence and mild impatience. The artisans around you continue their work, hardly glancing up. Visitors come and go as naturally as the tide, drawn by the glow of molten glass and the hope of acquiring some delicate wonder to carry back across the lagoon. You turn your pipe gently, letting the shape on the end cool just enough to rest, when a faint clearing of a throat signals the arrival of a merchant. He approaches with the exaggerated delicacy of a man stepping into a room full of unpredictable spirits instead of skilled workers. His fingers hover near the displays, though he holds himself with the restraint of someone warned never to actually touch a cooling piece. He greets you with flowery praises, words about craftsmanship, brilliance, legendary technique. The embellishments never end. You accept them with a polite nod, knowing full well that the same words will be offered at the next workshop down the lane. Merchants are artists of flattery, though their creations usually involve coins, not glass. He unrolls a small parchment bearing a sketch that is equal parts earnest and comically vague. Something about a goblet with the memory of a wave, or a vase shaped like the breath of dawn. His fingers flutter around the drawing, as though motion will clarify what the ink fails to express. You study it, not to solve the puzzle, but to appreciate the creativity of yet another poetic request. There is always someone wanting their glass to embody an abstract idea, a feeling, a story, a clever metaphor they hope to impress upon their dinner guests. You assure him that something can be made, though something rarely resembles the picture as faithfully as the client imagines. He beams, convinced you have captured his vision perfectly. You resist the urge to smile too noticeably. It is a gentle amusement, not ridicule, that rises in you. There is charm in seeing someone place so much excitement in a piece of glass that might break if the lagoon wind sighs too strongly. He leaves after promising to return by week's end. Others arrive soon after, each carrying their own blend of ambition and uncertainty. Some want ornate chandeliers to impress noble households. Others desire small bottles to hold imported oils or spices. A few bring broken heirlooms, wrapped in cloth, and whisper hopeful questions about whether they can be recreated, as if the rebirth of shattered memories were as simple as gathering molten glass and adding a bit of pigment. One woman arrives with a request that draws the faintest ripple of laughter from the artisans nearby. She wants a fish, specifically a fish that looks as though it has just realized it, forgot something important. Her hands mimic the expression, widening her eyes dramatically, while her mouth folds into a peculiar shape. You nod thoughtfully, as though contemplating the emotional capacity of a fish rendered in glass. In truth, you are already imagining how to coax such a whimsical expression from molten material. The humour of the request softens the hall in a pleasant way. While the requests accumulate, your hands return to their steady rhythm, shaping the day's work with unbroken focus. The visitors hover, sometimes navigating the hall with the awkward choreography of people unsure where they are allowed to stand. Their admirations come in hushed tones, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the balance of heat and attention required for the craft. A few ask questions: how hot the furnace burns, how long the cooling takes, whether a single mistake ruins the entire piece. You answer with calm simplicity, and their eyes widen as if you carry arcane secrets rather than muscle memory. One merchant, dressed in rich fabrics heavy with embroidery, approaches less for the glass and more for the theatre of watching it made. He leans in with too much curiosity, the heat from the furnace pushing him back with a gentle warning. He murmurs about the mystery of transformation, the marvel of flame bending sand into clarity. You listen, amused by his awe. Artisans often forget how enchanting their daily work appears to those who never step into a furnace hall. He eventually requests a set of goblets meant for a banquet, celebrating a new alliance between trading families. He wants the rims to shimmer like sunlight on calm water and the stems twisted in a spiral. Symbolic, he says, though the symbolism itself changes each time he tries to explain it. You agree to craft them with the shimmering effect he desires, though inwardly you wonder whether the guests at his banquet will ever know how much time he spent describing the spirals to you. Another visitor arrives, a quiet man with narrow eyes and a habit of inspecting the ceiling beams, as though glass were stored up there. He does not bother with flattery. Instead, he asks directly for bottles small enough to hide in sleeves, colours subtle enough to go unnoticed in candlelit rooms. The request is straightforward, but tinged with the sort of privacy merchants tend to carry. You make no inquiry, Glass does not judge the uses it is put to. It holds wine, oil, and secrets with equal disinterest. When he leaves, carrying one of your older pieces to study, you return to the furnace with a renewed sense of calm. The requests are curious, sometimes peculiar, occasionally absurd, but they shape the day in a gentle way. Soft hills of conversation between the long plains of heat and repetition. One visitor in particular draws your attention when he enters without a dramatic flourish. He stands quietly, studying the cooling racks as though searching for something lost. His eyes drift across the shelves until they find a small vessel with a faint swirl of green embedded in its body. He asks who made it, and you raise a hand modestly. He nods once, thoughtfully, then explains, softly, almost shyly, that the pattern reminds him of the canals near his home, the way the water shifts under the reflection of passing gondolas. He asks if you might make another, not identical, but with the same feeling. You feel a tug of warmth at the request. Not every commission seeks grandeur. Sometimes the simplest desires carry the most sincerity. You tell him you can try, and his gratitude is quiet but genuine. He leaves without fanfare, and you carry his request with a certain tenderness. Throughout the day, the hall fills with these drifting interactions, phrases half-whispered, requests wrapped in poetry, gestures that mix earnestness with vanity. Some customers make you smile, others prompt thoughtful reflection. A few spark ideas for shapes you've not tried before. Their presence does not disrupt the rhythm. It folds into it, becoming part of the gentle hum that echoes through the hall. You continue shaping glass, warming it, cooling it, guiding it through the steady repetition that defines the craft. As each visitor departs, their requests linger like faint ripples across the surface of your work, whether whimsical or practical, poetic or puzzling. They all weave into the quiet fabric of your day, reminders that the world beyond the furnace hall is full of people searching for beauty, even in the most fragile forms. And as you set another completed piece on the cooling rack, the soft voices fade once more into the glow of the hall, leaving you with the comforting awareness that these curious commissions give your work a purpose that stretches far beyond the quiet warmth of the furnace. The warmth of the furnace remains on your skin even after you step away from your bench. It clings lightly to your sleeves, lingers across your cheeks, and follows you toward the workshop door like a loyal ember reluctant to be left behind. The latch gives under your hand, and the moment you push the door open, a gentler breath of air greets you, cooler, carrying the lagoon's damp whisper. It slips along your arms in quiet contrast to the heat inside, and you inhale deeply, savouring the shift. Outside, the lanes of Murano unfold with the unhurried confidence of a place that has known artisans for centuries. The stones under your feet are sun-warmed, worn smooth by countless footsteps, and they hold the faint memory of earlier fires and older hands. The alleys curve and twist, forming a small labyrinth that feels familiar enough to navigate even with your eyes half closed from the glow of the workshop. The scent of brine lifts from the canals, mingling with the mineral tang of stone and the subtle sweetness of something baking nearby. Perhaps a loaf someone forgot about until now. A shop door creaks open on its hinges, releasing the faint sound of glass chinking against glass. The soft clatter could belong to cooling bottles, stacks of beads, or delicate figurines being arranged by careful fingers. Murano is full of those sounds, each one like a small story being told through vibration. You walk without any particular direction, allowing your feet to choose where the lanes bend. The island has a habit of guiding you where you need to go, even if you haven't decided yet. A gull calls overhead, drifting low between rooftops, before disappearing toward the lagoon. Beyond the walls of the workshops, the world breathes at a slower pace. Further along, two neighbours lean across a narrow balcony, trading gossip with the practiced ease of people who have shared the same view for decades. Their voices drift down in soft bursts. Discussions of someone's new commission, a cousin's trouble with suppliers, or the latest rumour about a noble family requesting an enormous chandelier shaped like a bouquet. Their tones carry more affection than seriousness. Gossip here has always been a gentle pastime, not a weapon. You catch fragments, but they float and fade like wind-blown threads, leaving only their pleasant cadence behind. A few steps later, you pass an open doorway where freshly blown glass cools on a bed of straw. The pieces rest in neat lines, glimmering like captured droplets of sun. You lean slightly closer, admiring the way faint trails of colour have settled within each form. Even cooling glass seems to hum with quiet pride, radiating a warmth that feels less like heat and more like a memory of it. Down the next turn, a small bridge arches over a narrow canal. You pause on the middle of it, resting your hands on the stone railing. The water moves lazily below, rippling with the patterns of light reflected from the houses lining the passage. A gondola glides by, the oarsman barely lifting his gaze as he steers. The wake he leaves behind pushes against the edges of the canal and then settles back into stillness. Across the water, laundry flutters from a window. White linens, a faded apron, a pair of stockings that sway like they've joined in the murmur of the island. The wind carries whispers of conversation, the scratch of a broom on the stone, and the faint laughter of children chasing each other through the alleys, where the echo of their feet seems to multiply. You continue your walk, passing a row of small shops. Many display glass beads, arranged like cascading rainbows. Strands of bright blues, warm ambers, and tiny ruby-red dots shimmer softly as the sun reaches them. The merchants sit on low stools, stringing beads with deft fingers, while chatting with any passerby who looks curious enough to linger. They give you a friendly nod. Everyone here knows the hands that work with fire, even if they don't share the same furnace. The deeper into the lanes you wander, the more the island reveals its quiet corners. Spots where the sound of water echoes off walls in gentle syncopation, where the scent of old stone thickens, and where sunlight filters through narrow gaps like jeweled threads pulled across the air. You find a shaded bend where a small fountain trickles into a trough. The water catches the light in a way that reminds you of molten glass when it first begins to cool, translucent, unsure of its final identity. Across from the fountain sits an elderly man who smooths the surface of a wooden crate with deliberate strokes. His hands are slow but steady, shaped by years of craftsmanship. Even if he no longer bends over furnaces, he nods at you and you nod back. Nothing needs to be said. Mutual understanding passes in silence, an acknowledgement of shared histories etched into muscle and memory. You move on, your steps echoing across the stones in an easy rhythm. Here and there, you glimpse other artisans, enjoying their moments of respite. Some sit in shaded doorways, sipping wine from modest cups. Others stand at corners, comparing burns on their sleeves with amused resignation, as though collecting them were a badge of honour rather than a hazard. The camaraderie of the craft extends beyond workshop walls. It floats in the air, woven into the island's small exchanges. Near one of the larger canals, you come upon a group of apprentices gathered around a bench. They point excitedly at a lopsided piece one of them holds. A small vase with a neck that veers left, as though it simply changed its mind mid-formation. Their laughter spills into the air, bright and easy. You can't help but smile at their delight. They celebrate their mistakes as much as their triumphs. Each one a reminder that the path from molten blob to cherished object is rarely straight. A vendor sits beside them, selling sweet fritters dusted with sugar. You accept one with gratitude when he presses it into your hand. The warm, crisp pastry melts gently on your tongue, and for a moment the world feels softened at the edges, coloured by the simple sweetness of something handmade. It pairs strangely well with the lingering taste of mineral dust on your lips, a combination that reminds you of the craft's balance between earthiness and grace. As you step into another lane, the walls narrow around you until only a ribbon of sky remains overhead. The quiet here is deeper, punctuated only by the muffled clink of cooling glass from a workshop somewhere behind the walls. That sound echoes like the faint ticking of a clock, marking time not by seconds but by temperature, by the slow settling of forms that will reveal their beauty only after the heat releases them. You find a wooden bench near a small courtyard and sit for a moment, letting your body relax into its curve. The stones beneath your feet radiate the faintest warmth, lingering from earlier sun. A breeze wanders through the courtyard, stirring loose bits of straw and rustling the leaves of a small fig tree. The branches sway lazily, offering a welcome bit of shade. From somewhere nearby, the muffled ring of a distant bell signals the hour. Shops close shutters. Someone calls to a friend in Italian, so melodic it blends with the soundscape rather than interrupting it. A woman carrying a basket passes in front of you, giving a brief smile before disappearing down another narrow passage. Her skirt brushes the ground with a faint whisper. Everything in these lanes seems to breathe. The island holds its history in its walls, in its waterways, in the way sound bounces gently from one corner to the next. You feel the day's warmth relaxing its grip, replaced by an ease that settles into your shoulders, reminding you how comforting this familiar maze can be. Eventually, the furnace hall calls you back, not through urgency, but through a quiet pull, like the faint warmth of a hearth felt from across a room. You stand again, brushing crumbs from your hands, and follow the way the lanes unwind toward the workshop. The echoes of conversations, the soft clinking of glass, and the briny air accompany you, creating a soft backdrop as you retrace your steps. When you reach the workshop door again, the faint heat seeping through the wood greets you like an old friend waiting patiently. You lay your hand on the latch, ready to return to the glow and the rhythm of flame. And as you step inside, the island's maze settles behind you like a gentle breath, folding its scents and sounds back into its narrow lanes until the next time you wander through them. The wooden door yields under your hand with a familiar weight, its hinges giving a soft groan, like a creature stretching after a long rest. The warmth inside greets you at once, rising in gentle spirals that settle around your shoulders with the certainty of something that has been waiting. The light from the furnace reaches outward, painting faint flickers along the walls, catching on iron hooks and shimmering across the stone floor. For a brief moment, the glow and the shadows seem to tug at each other, each trying to claim the room, their interplay forming a quiet, intimate dance. You step deeper inside, letting the door fall shut behind you. The muffled world of the island fades into a distant hum, replaced by the low, ceaseless breath of fire and the small clinks and whispers of tools returning to motion. The workshop carries its own pulse, subtle, steady, almost ceremonial. Even before you speak or lift a tool, it folds around you like a cloak, woven from heat, quiet, and history. You move past the main furnace toward the inner rooms, where the dimness deepens and curiosity often stirs. These smaller chambers hold shelves lined with jars, crates bearing strange marks, and tables scattered with ingredients that look more like the possessions of wandering alchemists than those of artisans. Each corner seems to hide some quiet intrigue, the places where formulas are written in faint chalk strokes, where colour experiments sit half forgotten, but still glowing faintly in the dust. This is the part of the workshop that seldom greets strangers, not because it is dangerous, though it can be, nor because it is forbidden, though it partly is, but because so much of what resides here feels like memory. Knowledge passed hand to hand, encoded not in books, but in repetition, observation, and the occasional whisper shared under the comfort of flickering light. You pause before a shelf filled with jars of minerals, their contents catching the furnace glow, even from this distance. The labels are written in the looping script of ancestors, whose names you only know from stories: Rosetta Ash, Iron Bloom, Salt of Manganese. Some ingredients sit openly, others are sealed with wax, bound in paper that crackles to the touch. Not every jar is used often. Some exist solely for those rare requests that require a particular shade or texture. A few have been waiting for a century, their pigments still bright, as if preserved by the reverence that surrounds them. A master enters the room quietly, brushing dust from his sleeves. His movements are slow, almost deliberately understated. He gives you a look that is part greeting, part shared understanding, an acknowledgement that this room asks for silence without ever needing to demand it. He glances toward a covered table, lifts the cloth, and reveals a tray lined with experimental pieces, glass infused with unfamiliar minerals that swirl in unexpected colours. A few pieces shimmer like captured storm clouds, others are clouded with elegant smoky streaks that mimic the surface of aged mirrors. He nods once, inviting you to observe. There is no lecture, no explanation. In this room, learning is absorbed the same way heat spreads through glass. Quietly, gradually, and with patience, you pick up one of the small samples between your fingers. Its surface still cool from hours spent resting. It refracts the furnace light in uncertain patterns, as if unsure whether it wishes to be transparent or opaque. You tilt it slightly, and the colours shift again, revealing tones you didn't notice at first glance. The master watches, eyes narrowing with a strange mix of pride and amusement. His arms fold loosely across his chest, as if to say, "This is how secrets behave. They reveal themselves only after you've stopped trying to chase them." He doesn't speak because words would make the moment too literal. Here, understanding is a matter of sensing, not solving. On another table, you notice a set of tools that seem familiar in shape, but unusual in size. A pair of shears with curved ends, a paddle with delicate carvings etched along its edge, a blowpipe shorter than standard. These are used for specialty work, pieces requiring precision so fine that only one or two artisans in the workshop attempt them. They appear unremarkable at first, but the more you study them, the more clear it becomes that they are imbued with tiny secrets of their own, a slight asymmetry that balances a particular motion, a subtle groove that ensures stability when the glass is at its softest. One artisan calls from deeper in the room, his voice low but edged with interest. You step closer and find him leaning over a small furnace box, its flame burning at a different temperature from the main one. The glow here is sharper, a shade more intense, meant for melting rare mixtures that would behave poorly in the main crucibles. He watches the flame carefully, adjusting the air passage. With a measured flick of his fingers, the iron grate rattles softly, responding to his touch like a loyal animal obeying a familiar command. He gestures for you to look inside, and you peer cautiously. Within the heat, a small pot holds molten material that shifts and ripples with unusual viscosity. You cannot yet discern its final colour. It looks pale, almost luminous, like moonlight dissolved in honey. The artisan gives a faint shrug, a gesture that communicates both confidence and resignation. Experiments like this often refuse to reveal their true nature until the final moments, long after the flame has shaped them. As you step back, you catch sight of a wooden chest tucked under a bench. The lid is partly open, revealing stacks of old sketches, designs for goblets, bowls, chandeliers, and mysterious forms whose purpose you cannot immediately guess. Some diagrams appear simple, almost naive. Others are so intricate they resemble architectural plans for impossible structures. The sketches carry fingerprints of their creators, flourishes, erased lines, hesitant strokes that betray uncertainty mingled with ambition. You ease a sheet from the top. The parchment is brittle, edges crumbling ever so slightly as you hold it. The drawing depicts a vessel shaped like a swirl of air, its base spiralling into a narrow stem. The sketch is annotated with tiny notes written in faded ink, describing airflow patterns, flame behaviour, and cooling strategies. It is a record of someone's pursuit of elegance, captured at a moment when the idea still hovered between imagination and reality. Placing the drawing back, you feel the entire room leaning inward in quiet companionship. These sketches, pigments, tools, and experiments share a certain eccentric charm. Their secrecy is not one of exclusion, but of affection. Traditions not locked away by force, but safeguarded because they feel precious. Something about the old rituals gives the work a pulse that outlasts the artisan, as if each technique were a thread woven through generations. You linger for a while longer, letting your gaze travel across the surfaces, the shelves, the jars, the furnace glow. The more you look, the more layers you notice. Nothing here is accidental. Not the order of the shelves, not the placement of each tool, not the faint markings on the stone. Even the dust seems arranged thoughtfully, settling only where it won't interfere. Eventually, you return to the main hall, feeling the shift in your steps, as if carrying a portion of the room's quiet gravity with you. The artisans glance up briefly, but say nothing. They don't need to. The subtle nods, the easy rhythm, the soft heat, it all fits you back into place as though no time has passed at all. And as the furnace breathes its warm amber light around you, the secrets behind the workshop doors settle once more into the air, held not by rules, but by the quiet devotion of hands that honour them every day. The hours drift forward, and the heat thickens in the workshop until it feels almost like a presence of its own, an old companion stretching wide across the hall. The furnaces burn with their fullest strength now, bright and assertive, their cores shimmering with a white-orange intensity that makes the shadows at their edges tremble. You shift your shoulders, settling back into the familiar weight of the day, and let the warmth seep into your bones with a strangely comforting heaviness. Around you, artisans move through the glow with steady intention, their motions clear and focused, though softened now by the haze that midday brings. Hands glisten faintly with perspiration, and the edges of sleeves turn slightly darker where fabric catches the heat rising from the marvering tables. Tools warm faster, glass cools slower. Even the air feels thickened, stretched between flame and breath. You lift your pipe again, guiding a small gather into shape, when a sudden unmistakable clink echoes across the hall. Someone has let a tool slide from their grip. It bounces once on the stone, rolling with a wayward wobble, before coming to rest against a bench leg. The artisan stands frozen for a beat, then releases a soft huff of laughter that escapes him almost unintentionally. The sound drifts over to you like a warm breeze, carrying the kind of amusement reserved for harmless accidents. No one scolds him, no one needs to. These small slips are part of the craft, especially when the heat deepens and the hours stretch long. A missed grip, a bead of sweat interfering with a steady hold, a moment of distraction. Each mishap becomes another thread woven into the shared tapestry of the workshop. The others glance over with mild grins as though acknowledging that the heat has claimed its first casualty of the afternoon. You return your attention to your piece, rolling it gently across the marva. The surface hisses and releases thin curls of steam, leaving faint trails in the air. The glass wobbles at the top, just a little too eager on one side, and you steady it reflexively. The wobble reminds you of something you saw earlier, one of the apprentices attempting a new form, only to produce a goblet that leaned dramatically to one side. When he held it up for inspection, the entire hall responded with a low ripple of laughter, not mocking, but warmly amused, as if everyone agreed the goblet had simply chosen a more interesting personality than intended. You hear another soft chuckle from two benches down, One artisan is shaping the opening of a vase when it suddenly expands more enthusiastically than expected. Creating an oddly flared mouth, she pauses, examines it with exaggerated seriousness, then shrugs. "A very surprised vase," someone comments under their breath. The entire bench shakes with quiet mirth. The midday heat has a peculiar way of loosening the rigid edges of the day. It blurs the boundaries between work and conversation, between mistakes and jokes, even the masters. Stern in posture, steady in hand, allow themselves a few small smiles now. One of them, working on a long stem for a decorative piece, draws it out with practiced grace. But the heat catches the thin glass at an unfortunate moment, making the stem droop into an elegant but unintended curve. He sighs lightly, and the apprentice beside him, trying to hide a grin, offers, "A stem with opinions, perhaps." The master's lips twitch. "It insists on its own path," he replies, adjusting the piece with a patience edged in humour. The furnace roars more loudly, adding a low thunder that rolls across the hall. You wipe a line of sweat from your brow with the back of your wrist, the motion smooth and habitual. Your arms feel warm, your breath filled with the faint mineral taste that drifts from the crucibles. You move your gather back toward the reheating chamber, sliding it into the glowing doorway on the end of your pipe. The glass brightens instantly, blooming with heat as the chamber breathes around it. For a moment, you lose track of time, watching the glow dance through the glass. A soft voice behind you jolts you back. "Careful. Too long and it will melt into a spoon for you." You blink, realizing you've lingered a few seconds more than intended. A small smile pulls at your mouth. "Almost," you reply, easing the pipe back as the glass sags only slightly more than you expected. The artisan who spoke gives a light chuckle, pleased with himself. These exchanges create their own rhythm, gentle, unforced, rising and falling with the ebb of concentration. Sometimes the entire hall seems to pause as someone attempts a particularly ambitious flourish. The air tightens briefly, tools hover, and the glow reflects in a dozen curious eyes. Then, if the flourish succeeds, a subtle wave of admiration flows quietly outward, expressed in nods rather than applause. If it falters, the reaction is even warmer. Laughter bubbles softly, seasoned with encouragement, and the kind of empathy that only emerges among people who have shared years of molten triumphs, near misses. Your own hands fall into their natural cadence again. Blow, turn, shape, reheat, but now there's a lightness to the motions, softened by the humour drifting through the hall. You shape the vessel's lip carefully, rotating the pipe with steady precision, and sense that the heat is coaxing out the subtler shades of fatigue hidden beneath your concentration. The warmth has a way of pulling smiles from you without your permission. It slows your thoughts enough that the work becomes almost playful. Near one of the side tables, an apprentice carries a newly formed piece toward the annealing oven. It's a delicate little bowl, its edges curling outward like petals. The apprentice holds it proudly, perhaps too proudly, and the weight shifts in his hands. He fumbles, just slightly, catching it with quick reflexes that save it from an unfortunate tumble. The gasp he lets out is loud enough for the hall to hear. A chorus of soft laughter follows, tinged with relief. He manages a sheepish grin, cheeks flushed with heat and embarrassment. "Nearly lost that one, he mutters. Someone pats his shoulder. "It would have bounced," comes the reassuring lie. You move your piece to the cooling racks, placing it gently among the warm companions already resting there. The glass glows faintly, not quite ready to reveal its final form. The annealing ovens hum with quiet authority, managing the slow transformation that protects each piece from the temperamental whims of temperature. As you turn away, a faint popping sound rings through the hall, a tiny shard cooling too quickly on the waste pile. The noise startles a young visitor standing near the doorway. His eyes widen, but before he can retreat, an artisan explains with gentle calm, "Nothing to worry about. The glass only remembers its own heat too strongly." The visitor laughs nervously, and the hall absorbs the sound with its usual warmth. The heat continues to deepen, yet the atmosphere remains light, coloured by the shared humour that softens the long hours. Even the furnace itself seems to pulse with a kind of contentment. Its roar steady, its glow inviting. You pick up your pipe again, feeling the familiar weight settle into your palm. The air shimmers faintly. The artisans work together in a harmonious blend of skill, sweat and amusement. Every stumble becomes a story. Every joke becomes part of the day's gentle relief. And in this midday world, where heat and laughter mingle, the craft feels less like labour and more like a quiet, communal dance. One where every breath of fire and every sigh of mirth holds its own small charm, warming the room as deeply as the furnaces themselves. The heat in the workshop softens into a deeper, steadier glow as the day stretches forward. The earlier laughter settles into a quiet hum, like embers drifting beneath the flames. Still warm but no longer flickering so brightly. The air thickens with the scent of burning wood, molten minerals, and faint traces of oil from well-used tools. Your hands adjust easily to the rhythm that returns, slower now, more deliberate, carrying the calm that comes after the midday swell. You lift a fresh blowpipe, its weight familiar, and approach the furnace once more. The chamber opens with a rush of light that brushes your face like a heated whisper. Within its depths lies a pool of molten transparency, shimmering like living amber. You gather a portion of it, turning the pipe with smooth, steady motions as the glowing mass gathers to the tip. This particular piece will not stay on Murano. It is one of the orders brought in earlier, commissioned through a letter sealed with wax, bearing a crest you did not recognize. A noble family, wealthy enough to send messengers across the lagoon, simply to request a pair of delicately crafted vessels for celebrations taking place. Far beyond these waters, the patron's name has already slipped from your memory, not out of disrespect, but from the sheer number of such names drifting through the workshop over years. The glass adheres to the pipe with the weight of a promise. You turn it gently, watching its glow soften as you step away from the furnace's mouth. The marver accepts it with a quiet sigh, smoothing the edges, coaxing the form into symmetry. You shape it with motions sharpened by habit, yet softened by reflection, letting the piece stretch out into a long, elegant curve, something refined enough to satisfy those who live under gilded ceilings and dine by candlelit tables. As you work, a subtle amusement touches your thoughts. These nobles will never feel the heat that shapes their prized possessions. They will marvel at the clarity, the colour, the graceful design, never realising how many breaths, how many careful rotations, how many tiny adjustments guided the material from molten unpredictability to dignified stillness. You imagine them lifting your finished piece with gloved fingers, unaware that the faint imprint of your effort lingers invisibly in every curve. You bring the gather back to the furnace, reheating it just enough to keep the glass pliable. The flame blooms inside the chamber, reflected in the glass surface like sunrise trapped within a bubble. Heat travels up the pipe, warming your palms through the cloth wrapped around the metal. You breathe onto the pipe softly, watching the form expand in a slow, graceful swell. The vessel begins to take shape, thin at the neck, widening at the belly, tapering again with a subtle, deliberate elegance. Nobles favour these shapes. They call them refined, exquisite, symbolic. You simply see balance. Too much curve and it topples. Too little and it loses its charm. Nobles read meaning into the symmetry. You read physics. Another artisan passes behind you, carrying a tray of half-finished glass stems, each one slim as a reed, destined to support goblets that will clink in halls you've never seen. He glances at your piece, nodding with a quiet appreciation. There's no need for words. Your hands and his speak a similar dialect, shaped by fire and patience. You continue shaping the vessel, letting the thin cobalt tint you added earlier stretch into faint swirls along the surface. It catches the light with a subtle shimmer, nothing ostentatious, just a whisper of colour that will glow gently under chandeliers in rooms where rich fabrics drape from ceilings and perfumes mingle with candle smoke. The thought drifts through your mind that your work might cross borders you'll never step across. Ships will carry it to courts filled with languages you do not speak. It may sit on long banquet tables surrounded by tapestries and painted walls, admired by people who cannot imagine the cramped alleyways where it was born, or the heat that soaked into your sleeves as you shaped it. Perhaps it will be praised as a marvel of artistry. Perhaps someone will raise it in a toast without noticing anything more than the reflection of their own jewellery in its surface. You smile at the quiet irony of it all. Returning to your bench, you reach for wooden jacks to shape the lip of the vessel. The wood, soaked carefully in water to keep it from burning, slides against the molten glass with a subdued hiss. Steam curls upward, carrying the scent of charred wood that always blends so peacefully with the mineral sweetness of the workshop. You guide the lip outward in a gentle flare, keeping the proportions slender, controlled. Each movement is deliberate but soft, enough intention to shape, not so much as to overwhelm. The vessel responds beautifully, its form stabilizing under your hands. You feel its weight change as it cools, as if it gains certainty with every breath of cooling air. It reaches a point where it no longer needs the blowpipe's guidance. You attach the punty, easing the vessel away from the pipe, with a crisp tap that releases it cleanly. It hangs from the new support like a delicate fruit on a thin branch. Turning it now, rotating the punty in slow circles, you shape the finishing touches, smoothing the base, correcting the smallest irregularities. The glass glows with the soft, fading warmth of something returning to stillness, and you feel its quiet gratitude in the way it yields beneath the tools. Nearby, another artisan works on a tall chalice meant for a foreign ambassador. The stem wavers slightly, and he corrects it with a tender confidence. You watch from the corner of your eye, your motions never pausing. His chalice will end up far from here as well, in rooms where politics swirl like currents beneath the polished shine of silver and crystal. It's strange how these quiet objects born from sweat, heat and simple breath travel into the centres of influence and wealth, while the hands that made them remain here, shaping, blowing, rotating, every day the same. When your vessel reaches its final shape, you carry it carefully to the annealing oven. It will cool slowly, protected from the sudden changes that could crack its delicate walls. You set it gently on the shelf, surrounded by other pieces destined for distant, unimaginable destinations. Standing back, you observe it one more time. The faint cobalt swirl, the elegant taper, the balanced weight that speaks to the hours spent coaxing it into existence. You feel a mild sense of pride, though softened by the knowledge that tomorrow will bring new shapes, new requests, new noble names that you'll remember briefly before letting them drift away. The workshop hums around you as others finish their own pieces. The collective rhythm of creation flows through the room, unspoken, shared, deeply human. Somewhere far from here, chandeliers will catch the light through your glass. Curtains will shift in grand halls, voices will rise in laughter and conversation, and your work will glow softly, carrying within it the warmth of the furnace, the breath of your lungs, and the quiet devotion of your hands. You exhale, feeling the heat settle once more into the centre of your being, and then, gently, you reach for the next blowpipe. The warmth of the workshop settles into a gentler rhythm as the hours lengthen, the earlier intensity folding into a quieter glow. The sunlight filtering through the high windows softens, carrying a muted gold that settles over everything like a veil. The beams stretch across the stone floor, catching shards and curled fragments, of discarded glass, turning them into tiny bursts of colour that shimmer in the fading light: red, blue, amber, green. Each piece glitters briefly, as though pretending to be something precious, just for a moment. You pause near one of these colourful scatterings, letting your gaze drift over the tiny fragments. They hold the faint warmth of the day, storing traces of the furnace's breath long after being discarded. Your foot nudges a sliver that catches the sun. It responds by glowing like a captured ember. There is a quiet charm in these remnants, objects that never became what you intended, yet still insist on shining at their own leisure. The furnace, once roaring with midday vigour, now paces itself with a slow, even pulse. Its glow still dominates the room, but the urgency has eased, replaced by a steady warmth that wraps around your shoulders like a settling cloak. The sound of crackling wood grows softer, folding into the background. Hum. You breathe in the familiar scent of heat and minerals, though now it mingles with the gentler tones of cooling tools and the faint sweetness of sawdust used earlier for shaping. Your hands move more slowly now, not out of tiredness, but from a kind of meditative drift that always seems to arrive in the late afternoon. The tools you reach for feel slightly heavier, as if the day has added its own weight to them. You wrap your fingers around the blowpipe with a comfortable, steady grip, lifting it as naturally as one lifts a cup of warm tea at day's end. When you approach the furnace, the heat rising from its mouth is no less powerful, yet the flames inside seem calmer, like a creature that has spent its energy and now stretches lazily in the dimming light. You gather molten glass with deliberate care, turning the pipe slowly to balance the glowing mass. The molten sphere expands and contracts subtly as the temperature shifts, revealing faint ripples of light inside it. As you roll the gather across the marva, the afternoon light blends with the glow inside the glass, creating an illusion of colours moving beneath the surface. The marva releases small tendrils of steam, a soft sigh of resignation as it absorbs the last of the day's heat. Your movements take on a gentler cadence, as though the glass itself has persuaded you to slow down, to match its gradual cooling. Nearby, another artisan tilts his head back, rubbing a hand across his brow. His motions are relaxed, almost languid, and when he catches your eye, he gives a slow, amused shrug that says more than words could. The day has been long, but not unkind. Work continues, though now its pace feels less like a race against heat, and more like a quiet stroll through familiar territory. The master at the far end of the workshop finishes shaping a piece meant for a merchant's home. He lifts it gently, examining its subtle lines with the ease of someone who has spent years reading glass, as though reading the wrinkles of his own palms. The fading sunlight glides across the surface, revealing soft gradients of colour that might have been too sharp under the harsher midday glare. He smiles faintly at the vessel, sets it aside, and stretches his back with a satisfying crack that echoes briefly through the hall. You continue shaping your own piece, letting it lengthen and swirl under your hands. The form feels different in this hour, not because the technique has changed, but because the day's energy has softened around you. Your breath flows more steadily through the pipe, guided by a sense of ease rather than precision. The glass responds with a gentler flexibility, as if the softened light has advised it to be more cooperative. At the reheating chamber, the glow is less blinding than it was earlier, making the glass appear more translucent as it warms. You rotate the pipe slowly, watching the reflections shift across the walls. The chamber hums with consistent warmth, but its fierceness has mellowed, offering heat without urgency. You bring the piece back to the bench, where the jacks rest in calm readiness. They glide along the glass with smooth, confident strokes, encouraging the shape to settle into itself. A soft drumming of fingertips on a nearby table signals an artisan waiting for his own piece to cool enough for the next step. His rhythm is slow, as though matching the fading light outside. A distant pigeon coos from a rooftop, somewhere beyond the walls, the sound drifting through a gap in the workshop shutters. It mixes strangely well with the faint crackle of the furnaces. Someone mutters good-naturedly at a stubborn bubble trapped inside their piece, the tone fond rather than frustrated. Another artisan, shaping a wide bowl, hums a tune that you can barely discern but find comfort in. These small sounds form the rhythm of the afternoon, gentle, unhurried, content. As your piece cools gradually, becoming more defined under your hands, you catch the reflection of the high windows in its smooth surface. The light angles downward, a warm stripe stretching across your forearm. Dust motes float lazily in the air, illuminated briefly as they drift through the sunbeam. For a moment, the workshop feels suspended in time, every detail held in perfect balance between light and fire. When the glass reaches the stage where it must rest, you place it in the annealing oven with a quiet satisfaction. The door closes gently, sealing the piece inside its slow journey towards stability. You exhale and let your shoulders relax, feeling the shift in your own energy as the room's cadence continues to settle. One artisan near the back of the hall stops working entirely, leaning against his bench while taking a thoughtful sip of water. He tilts his head toward the furnace windows, watching the interplay of light and flame. "The scrap looks prettier at this hour than the finished pieces," he says softly, mostly to himself. You glance at the flecks of glass on the floor, gleaming like scattered jewels under the golden light, and nod with a faint smile. There's truth in his observation. Beauty often arrives unannounced, in fragments rather than finished forms. You step away from your bench and walk a slow circuit around the workshop. Each corner reveals something softened by the afternoon glow, a half-shaped vessel glowing faintly, a row of cooling rods lined neatly like quiet sentinels, a tool resting exactly where its owner will pick it up tomorrow. The world feels gentle, as though the heat and the light have agreed to cease their earlier contest and simply coexist. When you return to your bench, the light has shifted again. The sun lowers further, tinging the edges of the windows with a deeper warmth. The shadows stretch long across the floor, turning the discarded fragments of glass into tiny islands of colour floating in a sea of dimming stone. The fires continue, their steady breath, calm and constant, as your hands find rest for a moment longer. The day narrows into its final hours, and the workshop embraces the softness of the slow fade. Everything warmer, quieter, more thoughtful. The rhythm relaxes again, inviting you to linger in its glow until the last light leaves the windows and the evening settles fully into place. The softened light in the workshop thins with each passing minute, slipping slowly from gold to a dusky amber that clings to the edges of the walls. The glow of the furnaces remains steady, but even that seems gentler now, as if the flames have grown aware of the world outside, preparing for evening. You feel the air shift, the faintest hint of cooler breezes sneaking in through high windows, carrying whispers of the lagoon as it exhales against the stones of Murano. The tools on your bench rest in stillness, their metal catching muted reflections from the fading sky. You gather them, one by one, with a quiet, automatic grace, arranging them in their places the way you might straighten a blanket at the end of a long day. The motions require no thought. They are the kind of gestures that settle in the body after years of repetition, becoming soft rituals that close the space between work and rest. Nearby, warm vessels line a wooden board, waiting for their turn in the annealing oven. Each one glows faintly, a quiet echo of the fires that shaped them. They sit like patient guests, their surfaces reflecting the last streaks of sunlight still clinging to the workshop rafters. Some are elegant and balanced, curves smooth and unbroken. Others carry quirks, slight warps at the rim, tiny dips along the belly, colours that settle differently than expected. Yet each one feels complete in its own way, holding its small victories and oddities with the same quiet dignity. You pick up the first of the pieces, feeling the warmth travel through your gloves. It hums softly in your hands, a residual pulse of the day's heat. With careful movements, you carry it to the annealing oven. The oven door opens with a low exhale, releasing a breath of controlled warmth, far more forgiving than the roaring flames of the furnace. This is a heat meant for comfort, not transformation. A cradle rather than a crucible. You place the vessel gently inside, settling it onto the smooth surface, where it will cool slowly, safely. The oven light catches the glass, revealing patterns you hadn't noticed before. Subtle spirals, faint whirls, tiny bubbles trapped like quiet secrets. You step back, giving the oven time to welcome its new occupant. One of your colleagues walks past carrying a tray of small glass ornaments. They jingle softly against each other, the sound reminiscent of distant bells carried across the lagoon at dawn. He gives you a brief smile, the kind shared in the last hours of the day when words feel unnecessary. He loads his tray into another section of the oven, closing the door gently, as though tucking the pieces in for sleep. You return to your board to collect the next creation, a delicate bowl thin enough that the sunset shines through it, casting rippled shadows on your hands. Its lip curls slightly more than intended, giving it a shy tilt, as though it hesitated in its final moment of shaping. You admire it for a beat before placing it in the oven, where it nestles beside the others like a small creature, seeking warmth. As you continue placing each piece inside, you notice how the oven seems to gather stories. Every vessel represents an hour, a breath, a challenge. Some pieces arrived here after smooth journeys, well-behaved shapes that followed your guidance without argument. Others resisted you, slumped unexpectedly, or insisted on forming bubbles no matter how steadily you coaxed them. But once inside the annealing oven, all these pieces rest with equal quiet. Their histories matter less than the way they settle together now. A faint, delicate tick sounds from within the oven. You tilt your head, listening. One of the pieces cracks, a thin, polite sound, like a quiet acknowledgement of its own fragility. You open the door enough to peer inside. A slender fracture has threaded its way across one of the more ambitious vessels, tracing a pale line along the surface. There is no disappointment in you, only a sense of inevitability mixed with affection. Glass behaves according to its own rules, yielding only when the conditions align just so. The crack looks almost graceful in the dim glow, like an accidental sketch drawn by heat. You leave it be, its lesson is already delivered. Not every creation needs to survive to carry meaning. The cracked ones have their own place in the rhythm of the craft. Gentle reminders of the balance between control and surrender. You place another bowl into the oven, feeling the warmth gather around your hands. The glow plays across your fingers, painting them briefly in shades of copper and rose. You tuck the vessel into the growing cluster inside. The oven holds them with steady, reassuring heat. No rush, no demand, only patience. Across the hall, someone adjusts the coals in the furnace, their silhouettes bending and rising in the shifting light. The furnace answers with a low sigh, content to settle into its evening pace. The room grows quieter as the artisans near completion of their work. The conversations fade to low murmurs, gentle and lazy, like boats drifting in shallow waters. The afternoon's haze has lifted, replaced by a calm that spreads slowly across the workshop. You feel it in your shoulders, in the loosening of your fingers, in the way the glass pieces now seem to glow softer than before. Each vessel that enters the annealer signals the closing of another small chapter in the day, a transition from labour to reflection. You carry one of the final pieces, a tall, slender flask, tinted with a faint hue of sea green. The colour suits the hour, mirroring the tones outside as the lagoon catches the fading light. You admire the stripe of pigment running through its centre, a thin line that seems to wander deliberately. Placing it gently inside the oven, You feel its heat slip away from your hands as the warmer air embraces it. Only a few pieces remain. A pair of small ornaments, shaped earlier in the day with playful curves, rest on the bench. Their surfaces catch the soft glow of the furnace behind you. You lift them carefully, feeling their weight, surprisingly light, almost buoyant. As you set them into the oven, they settle with a quiet clink, completing the day's gentle procession. When the last vessel slides into place, you stand back and watch the oven door close with unhurried certainty. The warmth radiating from it is comforting, reminiscent of a resting heartbeat. Inside, the creations rest in patient alignment, each one beginning its slow transition from molten fragility to durable form. You wipe your hands on your apron, feeling the fabric rough beneath your palms. The workshop lights dim slightly as the sun sinks further, casting longer shadows that stretch across the floor. The glow of the annealing oven becomes more prominent now, a steady promise in the deepening quiet. Around you, the artisans begin to ease out of their tasks. Tools clink softly. As they're set aside, someone hums a few notes of an old melody, barely audible but familiar, blending easily with the crackle of the furnace and the steady breath of the annealer. You take one last look at the oven, knowing some pieces will emerge tomorrow, whole and shining, while others will greet you with faint fractures, their ambitions undone by the natural whims of cooling glass. Either outcome feels acceptable, even welcome. There is a kind of comfort in the unpredictability, a gentle lesson that perfection is a luxury, but persistence is a certainty. As the workshop settles into its quieter, evening pulse, the glow from the cooling racks casts a warm reflection across your hands. You feel the day easing out of your body, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of effort made, shapes formed, and beauty coaxed from fire. And with that sense of calm, you step back, letting the warmth of the annealer linger like a fading sunset against your skin, knowing the night will soon gather the workshop into its arms. The workshop's warmth lingers on your skin as you step outside, a faint imprint of the day's heat following you into the cooling air. Evening has settled over Murano with gentle certainty, tinting the streets and canals in shades of blue that deepen with every passing breath. The first lanterns glow from doorways and windows, their small flames trembling inside glass globes crafted by hands not unlike your own. Their reflections trail across the water, stretching and folding in long ribbons that sway whenever a slight current passes. You draw in the night air, letting its coolness fill your lungs. It tastes faintly of brine and old stone, softened by the scent of bread cooling on kitchen shelves and the distant sweetness of some neighbour's simmering wine. The breeze carries these small domestic comforts toward you, smoothing away the traces of heat still clinging to your forearms. Your steps fall into a calm, unhurried rhythm on the worn stones. The day's sounds slip behind you, the steady breath of the furnaces, the clink of glass being set to rest, the muted voices of artisans tidying their benches ahead. The island offers a quieter world, one stitched together from flickering lantern light, the whisper of passing boats, and the soft hum of evening conversations drifting through open shutters. The narrow street bends gently, leading you toward a small bridge arching over a canal. Wooden beams creak underfoot as you cross. Below, the water shimmers with scattered amber and pale gold, a mosaic made from lanterns, kitchen lamps, and the occasional reflection of windows half hidden behind climbing vines. You lean slightly on the railing, watching ripples distort the glimmers into shapes that stretch and contract. Like tiny living creatures, the shifting light makes the canal look as though it is breathing. You stand there for a moment, letting the heaviness in your shoulders ease. The wind brushes past you with a soft, reassuring touch, carrying faint traces of rosemary from a nearby courtyard. Somewhere on the opposite bank, you hear the dull scrape of a boat being secured, followed by the muffled laughter of its owner greeting someone unseen. Their voices blend into the night so seamlessly that they feel like part of the water's movement. As you continue walking, the lanes narrow again, forming a corridor of stone walls softened by decades of weather and the slow passage of countless feet. Wooden shutters hang open above you, releasing small squares of warm light into the street. A woman's silhouette is briefly visible as she adjusts a lamp inside her kitchen. For a moment, the glow frames her hands in delicate lines, hands that have kneaded dough, sewn hems, and perhaps guided a child's small fingers in some patient task. She disappears back into her room, leaving behind only the faint illumination and the soft clatter of dishes being washed. You drift further into the heart of the evening, passing doorways where friends gather to share quiet stories after long days. Their voices carry comfortably, smooth and low, as if the night itself encourages gentler tones. Even their laughter feels softened. No sharp bursts, only warm ripples that slip into the stone and echo faintly as you walk by. At a small corner fountain, you stop again. Its water trickles lightly, catching the lantern light in steady fragments. The sound is soothing, as if the island sighs in relief at the cooling air. You let your fingers trail along the edge of the basin, the stone cool and slightly damp. The reflections there twist into wavering patterns, glowing with the light of distant lamps and the faint shimmer of stars beginning to wake. A cat slinks past you, brushing lightly against your ankle before disappearing down a narrow path. Its fur carries the warmth of some earlier sunlit perch, and the brief touch pulls a small, involuntary smile from you. The creature moves with effortless grace, disappearing into shadows that look deep enough to swallow sound. Further along the street, you hear the soft tapping of someone adjusting a lantern on their wall. An older man stands on a stool, ensuring the flame is steady inside the glass globe. He squints, satisfied, then steps down carefully. When his gaze meets yours, he gives a small nod, one of those simple neighbourly gestures that expect nothing but recognition in return. You offer the same nod back, and the shared acknowledgement feels rooted in the rhythms of the island itself. You pass a workshop window, where a faint glow still flickers. A shadow inside moves slowly, methodically. Some artisan finishing a last detail or preparing tools for tomorrow. You catch glimpses of their movements in the reflection, softened by the murky glass. It reminds you of how the island never truly sleeps. It only drifts through different types of quiet. As the sky deepens further, the colour shifts from softened blue to a velvety indigo that makes the lantern light appear even warmer. The contrast turns the streets into gentle ribbons of gold set against the cool backdrop of night. You follow one such path, your footsteps echoing faintly, each step creating a small imprint of sound that vanishes quickly behind you. You reach another bridge, lower and older than the first. The stones have been worn smooth by years of salt air and countless crossings. When you step onto it, the wood creaks softly beneath your weight, a familiar sound that fits perfectly within the evening's quiet symphony. Beneath the bridge, the canal narrows, and the lantern light stretches long and thin across its surface, pulling apart into rippling strands that seem to drift slowly into the darkness. Across the water, the distant laughter returns, a gentle chorus rising from a courtyard where families gather for supper. The sound carries a sense of ease, of comfort built over generations. It doesn't intrude, it flows around you like a memory still forming, familiar yet incomplete. You pause again midway across the bridge, resting your elbows lightly on the railing. The water below sways in slow, deliberate motions, reflecting the sky above and the lamps beside it. You watch as a small boat glides through, its bow parting the reflections into fluid fragments that shimmer momentarily before melding back together. The night air brushes against your skin again, cooler now, gathering around you with the softness of fabric settling on your shoulders. You close your eyes briefly, letting the quiet fill the spaces left empty by the day's work. The warmth from the workshop ebbs, replaced not by cold but by a deep calm stillness. When you reopen your eyes, the streets ahead look almost dreamlike, softened at the edges by the gentle glow of lanterns. You follow the path instinctively, your steps guiding you through familiar turns, past houses with quiet windows, along canals drifting toward moonlit stillness. The voices fade as you move further away until they become little more than distant murmurs carried by the breeze. The night settles more fully, wrapping the island in its calm embrace. Every street seems slower now, every shadow deeper, every reflection more patient. As you near home, the glow of your own small lantern waits by the door, trembling faintly in the breeze. The sight pulls a soft breath from your chest, a mix of relief, of quiet satisfaction, of the simple pleasure of returning to a place that holds your rest. You reach for the door, the cool handle fitting easily into your hand, and as the night hums softly behind you, the lantern light flickers once more across the water, as though bidding you a gentle goodnight. The door closes behind you with a muted click, sealing out the cool night air and gathering the silence of your home around your shoulders. The warmth inside is faint, lingering from whatever small fire burned earlier, and the stillness settles easily into your bones. You take a slow breath, letting the weight of the day shift and settle, as though each hour softens its grip the moment you cross the threshold. Your steps move across familiar floors, through rooms shaped more by use than design. A faint scent of linen and wood fills the space, steady and soothing, like pages in an old book that has absorbed years of quiet nights. You leave your things in their place with the unthinking care of routine, tools set aside, apron folded. Once over the back of a chair, sleeves rolled down and brushed gently, as though dusting away the last remnants of heat. Through the small window, you see the lagoon darkening into a deep, reflective calm. The water holds the night like a mirror polished by time, broken only by the trembling reflections of lanterns swaying on distant docks. Their glow ripples across the surface, stretching and gathering again with each quiet motion. A low murmur of waves reaches your ear, softened by the walls but still clear enough to give the sense of the world continuing just beyond your home. Gentle, unhurried, content to move at its own slow pace. You wash your hands, lingering as the cool water slips across your palms. It carries away the last traces of mineral dust and microscopic flecks of glass, though the memory of the textures remains. Smooth metal, warm tools, the faint grit of pigment, the subtle give of molten glass beneath wooden jacks. Those sensations are part of you now, settled somewhere beneath your skin, as familiar as your own breath. When you finally lie down, the mattress sighs softly beneath your weight. The room settles around you, as though adjusting its quiet to your presence. A faint draft moves through the cracks of the window frame, carrying a whisper of lagoon air into the room. You close your eyes, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of the water outside. A muted lapping, gently tapping at the edge of the island, as though telling an old story in a language older than the city itself. The darkness is not empty. It holds the faintest shimmer of lantern light, drifting through the window in thin ribbons, barely enough to outline the curve of a chair or the edge of the wall. The glow moves with the water, shifting gently each time the lagoon stirs. The movement is calming, almost hypnotic, echoing the rhythms of the day in its own soft way. As your body sinks deeper into rest, your thoughts drift. Not sharply, but like leaves carried on a slow current. You picture the furnace glow, its steady heart beating inside the workshop. You recall the breath you gave to molten glass, the way it expanded beneath your care. The warm resistance of material, still deciding what it wanted to become. These memories are not sharp images, but sensations. Heat, weight, colour, and the quiet satisfaction of shaping something ephemeral into something more enduring. You think of the small imperfections that emerged along the way. Wobbles, tiny bubbles, unexpected curves. They were not failures. They were markers of the craft's personality. Tiny humours that revealed themselves only to the hands shaping the work. It comforts you to think that no object leaves the workshop without carrying at least a trace of unpredictability. Perfection has never been the goal, only honesty. The day forms itself into a quiet chain of moments, threaded together by breath, heat and motion. Each one seems small on its own, a pause at the furnace door, a nod shared with another artisan, a gentle laugh at a crooked shape, the careful placing of a cooling piece into the annealer. Yet, taken together, they create a rhythm, a life built not on grand accomplishments, but on steady devotion to something simple and glowing. You picture the vessels resting in the annealing oven, the soft hum of heat surrounding them as they settle into themselves. Some will greet you tomorrow, whole and shining. Some will bear faint fractures that will make you sigh with mild disappointment and quiet acceptance. Either way, the work continues, shaped as much by persistence as by talent. Glass obeys no one fully. It only cooperates with those who show up each day with patience. The night deepens. The lagoon whispers. You let your breath fall into the same slow pace. Outside, a single boat glides by, its oar dipping once into the water with a soft rhythm that reaches your window in small echoes. You imagine the ripples spreading outward from the boat's path, reaching the outer edges of the canal before fading. Even the water, it seems, carries its own quiet lineage, movements that come and go, leaving no mark but continuing, nonetheless. Your thoughts drift toward the lives of those who shaped glass before you. You've never known their faces, but their gestures live in your hands. The angle at which you tilt the pipe, the way you evaluate the colour of the molten gather, the timing you trust without counting. These motions were passed from one artisan to the next, not through books or boasts, but through the quiet observation of apprentices watching masters, and masters watching the material itself. You feel connected to them, not through words, but through the shared, wordless devotion to the flame. There is a comforting humility in this lineage. You shape the glass, but the craft shapes you in return. Gently, gradually, like water smoothing the edge of a stone, each day adds something small to your understanding. A new patience, a softer touch, a deeper appreciation for the fragile and the impermanent. You think about how far your work might travel. Pieces you shape today may soon sit in homes you'll never enter, in lands you'll never see. They will catch the glow of unfamiliar candles, hold exotic spices, or decorate tables laid for celebrations you'll never attend. And somewhere in their glimmer, a fragment of your breath, your steadiness, your attention will linger. Quiet, unseen, but present. The thought brings a warmth to your chest, gentle and grounding. Your work moves outward across the world like ripples, even as you remain anchored to the lagoon, the workshop. The sequence of days that blend into one another softly, like shades of colour flowing through molten glass. You shift slightly on the mattress, nestling deeper into its cradle. The night sounds continue their slow, calming litany. The distant call of a gull, the soft creak of a wooden beam settling, the steady whisper of water brushing against the island's edge. These sounds weave together into a lullaby, older than any craft. Your breath evens out, aligning with the rhythm outside. The day loosens its hold, dissolving gently into the quiet. In the darkness, a final thought drifts through your mind. Not sharp, not urgent, just a soft glow of awareness that your life, like the glass you shape, is formed through heat and patience, illuminated by small moments of wonder and carried forward by the quiet devotion you give to each simple, glowing step. And with that, sleep folds itself around you like warm glass cooling into form, holding you gently as the night settles fully over the lagoon. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S., Rich Davis, and Leslie Schofield. Sleep well.